Welcome to Missed Opportunities for Good, the podcast where we open up the space to have conversations about trends and campaigns at the intersection of marketing, advertising, and impact.
Hi, I'm Alana Ficalora.
Hey, I'm Steph Belsky.
We're social impact strategists, colleagues, and friends who are on a mission to revolutionize the industry we love.
Today, there's a lot of virtue signaling, greenwashing, cause washing, or companies saying nothing out of fear of getting it wrong.
Whether it's a moment or a movement, it still has to be real. It has to be authentic and aligned with the brand, not just performative. It's about the action being taken that goes along with the messaging.
So we're here to highlight who's doing it well, what could be better, and how companies can stop leaving money and the potential for real social change on the table.
Our guest today on Creative Conversations is Anastasia Kārkliņa Gabriel. Okay. Anastasia, please, if you can start with telling us why you do what you do without literally saying what you do. So what's your why?
Gosh, exciting to be here. Thank you. First, when you read that intro, I know I'm with my people. So I know I feel at home and I'm very excited for this conversation. As to why do I do what I do? Well, I think the simplest answer to that is that culture is the operating system of our lives. I think about it as a sort of matrix that we, all of us, without exception, live in. It shapes who we are, what we value, what we buy, what we think is beautiful, what we think is ugly, what we think is desirable, aspirational, and so on and so forth. So culture, when you think about it in simple terms, is a way of life. It structures everything from who we are to how we see others and ourselves. And for that reason, culture is very central to what I do. It's my why. It structures and shapes everything from the individual choices that we make to the brands that we consume, to politicians that we like, the singers that we listen to, and I could keep going. So culture is life, and that's why I study it.
Awesome.
Love it. Well, now we're actually going to share with our listeners what it is that you actually do. So, Dr. Anastasia Kārkliņa Gabriel is a cultural theorist, writer, and social critic whose work examines the meaning of culture in everyday life. Previously a senior researcher at Reddit, amazing, the underbelly of the internet, she bridges theory and practice to help organizations understand how cultures shape what people value, believe, and do. Yes, you're in the right room. Dr. Gabriel is the author of Cultural Intelligence for Marketers, an award-winning book about how brands can think critically about culture to create work that is more relevant, responsible, and resonant. We are so delighted that you're joining us today. Thank you so much, Dr. Anastasia, for being here.
Thank you.
So to say our first doctor on the podcast too, we fancy. So welcome to Missed Opportunities for Good. We're so happy to have you. After hearing you speak on the Sweathead, What Can Marketers Learn from Sydney Sweeney Great Jeans campaign, I knew we had to have you on the podcast. You were speaking our language. As you said, you're with like-minded humans in the room. You know, this is what we do. This is what we love, is talking to the people who are truly doing the work and making change and screaming it from the rooftops. And I immediately got your book after hearing you speak. It's literally right here. I have like every other page bookmarked. It's great. Here for all of it. And we're excited to get into it and really dive deep with you. So now let's get to know you a bit better.
Absolutely. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for reading, for supporting. I'm excited for this conversation.
Absolutely. So the first question we always ask our guests is, what first drew you to doing impact work?
That's a wonderful question. And I want to think about my career journey, but I think it actually starts a whole lot earlier in my life. I grew up in post-communist Eastern Europe, where I was a 13-year-old girl who was interested in what was happening around her. So I was always very in tune with social issues that no one seemed to want to talk about around me. And more than that, it felt that you were not supposed to talk about the social issues around you. And that in itself was a kind of baggage from years, decades of authoritarianism that my people and my community have endured, where the question of why is this happening? Is this wrong? Could it be better? How can we make it better? Was not necessarily something that was part of our common sense, if you will. And I was drawn to impact. And when I say impact, I think of social justice, equity, making decisions and taking action in order to impact the world around you in a positive way, whether as an individual or as a business or as an organization, because it honestly gave me hope. And growing up in that environment as a girl felt in many ways restrictive. And the fact that I could care about impacting the world and learn about movements and organizations and people in history who were making an impact really made me more hopeful in a place that didn't allow a lot of hope. So that's where I first was drawn to impact as an activist. And I wanted to be a social worker when I was growing up. That did not quite happen, but I'm a big believer that you can make social impact in any line of work. We're all, relating to one another. We all live part of society. So it really started there and took me on a journey to graduate school where I specialized in cultural studies, specifically with focus on race, gender, and sexuality, and eventually into the world of media and marketing, where I'm very passionate about the role that brands play in shaping public messaging.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Wait, I have a follow-up question.
Yeah, go for it.
It's interesting coming from that space and thinking that you were going to be a social worker. I always find people's journeys to be so interesting, right? And so how did you end up bridging towards the media space? Did you see that initially as an opportunity where you could have greater impact by utilizing your skill set and the work that you were doing in your education to have a greater impact there? Or what kind of brought you into the media space?
Initially, no. My entire story is of things I could have never imagined. I came to the United States when I was 18. I don't think I knew anybody with a PhD. I didn't think I even knew what a PhD really was. And I always say I would have hysterically laughed in anybody's face if they suggested, 6, 7 years ago that I would work in marketing, in media, or if I would work in business. My career took me on a lot of unexpected turns, which has made it so exciting, of discovering new things about myself that I did not previously even consider because I did not see anybody working in those spaces growing up. I was very much shaped by my academic experience in the US. And it interestingly started so unexpectedly when in college, when I was already in graduate school, I was a participant in a building takeover by the student activists that were protesting racial injustice on campus. There was a Black woman worker that was allegedly verbally abused by one of the university leaders. So, I was young and passionate, and my friends and I were advocating on her behalf. And I was thrown into the role of being the media liaison for the activist group and ended up facilitating a lot of interviews, the messaging of the group, handling all the communications, as well as sort of embodying the role of a citizen journalist, using Twitter at the time to push the videos for protests, to get them circulated, etc. And I was an academic just thrown into this. So my comrades lovingly dubbed me the media queen. And I realized, I think I have other skills and talents, or I can use things that I am learning about narrative, about narrative and culture, about messaging, even, thinking about how a novel is organized, right? How author works strategically with rhetoric and narrative to construct a particular story. Oh, I can actually do that at scale, talking to people and using media and social media to advance that message. So it was completely unexpected. And at that time, I still didn't know I would work in media and marketing, but I think it opened up my mind to something different. And then when I was finishing my PhD, I really started questioning if I actually wanted to be a traditional academic. And by that point, I ended up seeking out alternative careers. So it's a journey.
That's so cool. I think that's so interesting because there are some people that go into this industry full force, knowing they want to work in marketing and media. And then they're like, ooh, I don't like what's happening. Let me bring this other angle. But you coming to it as an academic, I think is so fascinating and interesting. And so I love, like, I don't know, I just love trajectories and how they're not all the same, especially when it comes to creative spaces, because they're not, right? And so you bring such a unique lens to the space of marketing and media from coming from that background, which I think is very cool. So on that note, maybe this will tie into your activism, but is there an issue area or multiple issue areas that you are most passionate about? I know we kind of touched a little bit on a couple different areas, but in your personal work, do you focus in any particular areas?
Yeah, I care about the issue of identity or the role of identity in our lives. And that's shaped by my training in Black studies and feminist studies, which was the focus of my academic career. I was actually trained as a scholar of race primarily, and the way that race intersects with gender. So that is of particular concern to me as I realize the power that media has in cultural and society. And so the question of representation, but not specifically representation as a kind of tokenistic gesture of brands and organizations displacing people who signal difference in campaigns. That is not what I'm talking about. Rather, the importance of storytelling, nuance, and complexity, and seeing people who have been historically underrepresented or misrepresented in advertising and media in their full humanity and with dignity. I don't know that our industry truly realizes the impact that brands have on how we get conditioned into social norms and culture norms. An easy example of that is beauty standards and the way that has historically people who are light skinned have been privileged and seen as more beautiful, attractive, and so on. So that is a particular passion of mine. I would say that I'm always in tension with the idea or the, I think, outdated belief that brands exist just to sell. And to quote Professor Jason Chambers, who is one of the historians of race in advertising, who calls in his book advertising one of the leading image producing industries. And I find that to be so true. So the way that image and identity and humanity and human worth intersect is of great interest to me.
Yeah. Isn't there a stat? I mean, I'm sure it's more now because I feel like the last time I looked this up was a while ago, that we consume over 10,000 images a day.
I believe it.
Which is primarily advertising between that and social media and everything else. And I think that statistic came out, like 5 years ago. So I'm sure it's exponential since then. I remember in your book, you talking about how marketers have the power and responsibility and how we create these identities and these images that shape people's view of the world and themselves and the importance of that, right? And I think so often everyone's so focused on this individual campaign they're working on or this brief or this, business goal, and they forget that what they put out into the world matters and how it's received matters. And that if you're not taking all those pieces into consideration, you're influencing people in such a great way. I mean, I loved all the cultural references you put in the book too about how pink became the color for girls. We forget how much advertising has shaped our beliefs about the world in general, and the responsibility that comes with that, and what might seem like a one-off campaign actually can change people's view for years and years and years to come. And so we need to take that responsibility seriously, because it does affect people's identity and how they view others and all that. So anyways, I love that.
Mm-hmm. And I also, I love the idea of culture as being a software that's running in the background. I know you mentioned that a lot in the book, and it's so prevalent and also shapes who we are and how we are and the things that we do. So, I wasn't surprised when you said I went from social work to being a media person, because that's exactly what you wanted to do. You wanted to take what is there and moving, into the next phase of how to distribute that in mass and how to really affect change. And obviously you also know that change doesn't happen overnight. It's that small drip like you talk about, and hopefully, we are enacting some of that change by having more of these conversations. And that's the idea behind this podcast and behind what you're doing, and slowly, incrementally making changes.
Absolutely. It's our responsibility to reframe how we see the creative work that we put out in the world. When you think about it, every single campaign is a narrative. It does not matter whether it's purpose driven or it is just a humorous, entertaining campaign. Every single piece of work that reaches our screens and is presented to consumers has a narrative that either confirms what we believe, challenges what we believe, expands it, and so on and so forth. And so for that reason, it seems so imperative for marketers and brand leaders to understand that we do so much more than just sell product. And that seems to be such an archaic notion that people who are critical of purpose in marketing, who are critical of increased diversity efforts, sometimes for valid reasons, don't seem to grasp the cultural power of media. And that to me is the most troubling about the messages I see within the marketing industry circles that seem to try to convince us still that marketers' role is simply to sell. Well, it is to sell products by selling people ideas, and ideas are never neutral. So for that reason, it just seems so critical for the new generation of media professionals to reframe how we understand the very essence of what marketing is meant to do.
Yeah. It almost feels like there should be and I don't know if this is true now. I don't feel like it was when I was in college, but that there should be like a marketing ethics class in college required, and cultural marketing as a class that's required, or conscious marketing as you call it, right? To have that sort of basis of knowledge before you're going out into the workforce and catching people while they're young and forming their thought process for their careers, to kind of set the tone. I mean, obviously we still need to work with the existing companies, but all these things that you can embed when people are young and taking in everything around them and taking that as the truth. So to influence how their career trajectory will take off, and to influence more at scale, I guess, as they go out into the workforce.
Yeah. Speaking of being in the workforce, Anastasia, what's an impactful project you've worked on, whether recently or at any point in your career, that you're really proud of?
I worked with McCann a few years ago, and I think I'm able to speak about the campaign because it's been a while. We conducted rather rigorous ethnographic research for Ulta Beauty on the topic of beauty and its meaning, specifically for people who have historically been sidelined in the beauty industry. And that meant going into people's home and observing them participating in beauty rituals, in beautification, and asking them questions about what beauty meant for them. We talked to young Black teenage girls, older middle-aged South Asian women who never felt seen in the advertising they consumed. We talked to men who also enjoy beauty and makeup, but never felt included in our world until maybe a few years ago. And we still have so much more work to do. So that particular project was most impactful, and it informed a lot of the work that the brand went on to do in the next few years. And to me, it really underscored the importance of cultural consumer research, that inclusive marketing, brands' engagement with culture cannot just happen. It confirmed to me the importance of cultural and rich consumer insight, and specifically the importance of research for strategy in making sure that marketing communications are more inclusive, resonant, and representative, because so much of our industry has been based on this idea of a universal human truth and insight. And I talk about that in my book, that what we might think as a universal truth is actually shaped through our own experiences and who we are and how we move through the world. So it seems to me that that kind of research is attentive to nuance, to complexity, to history is necessary when we not only talk about impact in advertising, but advertising in general. So that particular work, being able to be with people, to be in their spaces, to have the privilege to be in their bathroom as, you know, they're doing their hair or putting a makeup on, and really dive deeper into the meaning that beauty has in their personal lives and through the lens of their stories, which is very special and reminds me why I landed doing what I do now.
I love that.
Love that.
And it's so in tune with everything you speak to about the importance of actually speaking to the community and engaging with the community, and actually paying people from the community that you were speaking to build that cultural intelligence, and not just taking this information for free and taking advantage of these communities, but truly working with them and gaining that real information is so important.
And then, of course, when the community sees themselves reflected back through these messaging and through this marketing and media, they're going to resonate with that because they are physically seeing themselves in these messages. They're not being told their story by someone else. They're being told their story by their own community. And that's really the trend that I think we're all luckily starting to see more of, because what a novel concept. If you want to reach a certain demographic or a certain audience, why not just ask them? But yeah, it's refreshing.
I would even push it further and say that in so many spaces within media and marketing, there's still this idea that what we might call multicultural marketing, although I know there are some critiques of that term, is about reaching, you know, specific demographics. When we look at the data, Gen Z and certainly Gen Alpha are the most racially and ethnically diverse generations in the history of the United States. So whether one wants to pay attention to the role of identity in marketing or not doesn't actually quite matter, because increasingly we live in an inherently multicultural society where these choices are no longer about charity, or morality or even wanting
Right.
to be a good person, quote unquote, or a organization that does good in the world. It is simply part of the job. And the fact that
Yeah.
there's still resistance to that in certain segments of our profession is troubling, and that's another, to me, another point of evidence that actually marketing and advertising doesn't exist outside of the cultural context that shapes our lives beyond our, the profession and beyond the
Yes.
industry, because the kind of tensions and disagreements that we see playing out in marketing is a reflection of the same kind of tensions we see emerging on the social political level. Does AI
Yeah.
matter? Should we be investing
Entirely.
as much of our attention and resources in repairing harm done to
Yeah.
communities of color, for instance, Black communities,
Yeah.
and so on
Yep.
and so forth.
Mhm.
So there is no escape between
Yeah.
what we do professionally and what the forces that are shaping our everyday lives as just people who live in this country.
Yeah.
Well, and especially when you look at any of the natural disasters slash man-made disasters that are happening, and we're only going to be seeing more and more of them, right? And how brands react to those types of events and how they respond. And I don't know, there's something about how this isn't marketing anymore. It's survival. Period. We need to recognize that we are all humans, that a brand is made up of people, as you say, right? Because it is. And we're people helping other people give a shit about other people. Like, that's what this is supposed to be about. And yes, we are also selling products, but like the ratio needs to be flipped because our survival as humans, as humanity, depends on more positive messaging, more conscious messaging that is going to keep all our shit together. Sorry.
Yeah.
I
I,
just go on this soapbox
I
all
gotta
day
say, what
long.
you're saying like speaks to my soul, and that's why I call culture a form of an operating system, a software, etc. Because why is that controversial? We are essentially at its core fighting against this idea that it is normal and acceptable to make profits at the expense of other people and at the expense of the environment and the planet. And that to me
Yeah.
really nails down this idea of the
Yeah.
power of culture, that we have grown up in a
Yes.
society that has taught us that that is normal, that it is normal
Yep.
to just
Yep.
think about your revenue, to just think about the products you're selling, and that anybody who dares to
Yes.
suggest that businesses and brands and any sort of organization should care about their impact is somehow not a real marketer, doesn't understand business. Again, this is a stuff of culture that has socialized
Yep.
into believing that this is normal. And to
Yep.
your earlier
Entirely.
about the presentation I gave about the Sydney Sweeney campaign, we are seeing that
Mm.
play out in real
Yeah.
time. To
Mhm.
get a little bit specific here, we're seeing trade process like Adweek platform, Craig Brommers, the CMO of American Eagle, who is going around the industry with his messaging, and the messages goes, what if it's working? What if it worked? Why did not anybody pay attention to it? And so I hear that and I say, oh, what if oppression worked? What if racist messaging worked? Which is
Right.
exactly
Right.
what we see happening in the 60s and the 70s and 80s. And I talk about that history in the book because I want us to understand that this is not new. And the kind of
Mhm.
Yeah.
mindsets and archaic ways of
Yeah.
thinking about media and marketing and business overall is really reflective of I mean, people who lived during the segregation era who did say that Black representation in advertising did not matter and had activists in a similar fashion fight and struggle for something better. So the struggle goes
Yeah.
on. It's been here for
Yeah.
decades and decades and decades.
Yeah.
And I'm getting a little fired up here, but
No, because it's rightfully
no,
so.
dude, this is good because it's so important for us
How could you not?
to see like the kind of things that we have accepted as normal as not normal. They are fundamentally immoral. You
Right.
know, they're fundamentally
Yeah.
ethically
Yes.
questionable, but somehow, some way within the system of capitalism, if you will, we have accepted them as given, as
Yeah.
something that everyone is supposed to agree on, which I just reject outright.
Yes, 100%. For an industry that thinks that it's so innovative to
Mm.
carry on with business as usual and not realize that there is a better way and another way of looking at things, right? And then also to your point in the book and speaking to the history of this is what is history for if it's not to learn from? And so if we can't learn from what's happened before us and what didn't work
Yeah.
or the problems that came from the way things happened in a certain way before, then what are we even doing here, you know?
And all the data
Uh,
that suggests that inclusive businesses drive growth. And if
yep.
you have an option
Right.
of being more inclusive, being more representative of the customers that you serve, and you argue against that, then what are you really arguing for? Because it's certainly not growth and revenue,
No.
Right.
positive movement for your business. If there is a data that suggests that when done right, inclusive, diverse, representative marketing works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe this will be tied in or maybe not. But what is the biggest challenge you're facing right now? If it's in pushing these ideas forward and getting more people to understand and adopt these behaviors that we're also passionate about, or something else entirely?
The challenge that has been ongoing, but I think has intensified, is the ability to bring people along and invite more people to be brave and to be real and to be bold and to stand
Yeah.
on business and to be principled in how we speak
Mm.
about marketing, media, advertising, business, society in the current political moment. I have been thinking quite a bit about the last 5 years. And in May of this year, unfortunately, I had a loss of my family. So it was a bad time for me. But I really wanted to write about
Mm.
what has happened in the last 5 years and how
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
May, June 2025 time period, no one, at least very few people, even mentioned what happened in the United States, but also within marketing and advertising in June of 2020, when the
Mhm.
tragic murder of George Floyd sparked this way of conversations.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to write
Mhm.
something, and just unfortunately was not in the mental health space to do that. I was dealing with issues on a personal front, but
Yeah.
it didn't go unnoticed for me that there was complete
Right.
silence. And I actually do think that I pitched something to Adweek at that time and just did not hear back. And so it kind of fizzled out. But I think that moment for me represents a lot of sadness and a lot of grief about the kind of change that I thought many of us was possible, and the way that the system has worked, the way that the system works to co-opt and to whitewash the radical demands that were being made. And so that is the greatest challenge, I think. How do those of us who believe in something better continue to speaking when we are punished? I certainly have been
Yeah.
professionally, when we are censored, when we are not invited in spaces that we would have been invited when that was popular. How do we keep going? But also, how do we inspire
Mm.
other people who are like minded, who are in community with us, to not despair, to find that energy to say the hard thing,
Yeah.
to be unpopular when at the core, this work doesn't bring a lot of reward. It does not bring a
Yeah.
lot of clout. It doesn't bring money. It takes it away from you, right? It poses risk.
Yeah.
So
It
it
shouldn't,
shouldn't, but
but
you
yes.
know, but it does. And
No, it's
so,
real. It's very real. Yeah.
yeah, the challenge of the current moment in my eyes is to inspire, support, bring in more people and to continue doing the
Yeah.
work when it's becoming increasingly even dangerous to speak about these
Yep.
issues. I mean, I'm an immigrant in this country, and even as I'm saying these words, I feel the risk and I feel
Yeah.
all sorts of personal, professional implications.
Yeah.
So I think and I struggle with that a lot. And I hope it
Yeah.
resonates with a lot of other people because that would certainly make me feel less alone in it.
Yeah. I think that is very
I think from
real.
this
Thank you.
audience, it will.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I got chills when you said that because it's you're voicing what so many people are feeling right now. I mean, even at advertising week last week, I remember talking to a woman who's a creator who is, you know, first generation immigrant, sorry, second generation. And she was talking about how she wants to stand up. She wants to talk about ICE and what's happening to Mexican immigrants. And she wants to talk about all of these things because she herself is Mexican. And she was like, I know my community wants to hear this from me, and I'm too scared. And so thank you for saying the damn things and for being brave. And that does not go unnoticed or unappreciated from either of us. And yeah, it's a risk. And if you don't say it, nobody else is going to say it.
Yeah.
So
we
thank
need
you.
people who are willing to speak up because then otherwise everyone's just succumbing to one person's idea, one political view of the world of how this should go.
Yeah.
And we all know that's not necessarily what everyone else's truth is. And so being able to have people who are willing to speak out and stand up for what's right and like the importance of having these conversations and the importance of it, you know, on a human level and on a work level in the sense that like brands shouldn't be ignoring these conversations because we are humans
Right.
and these are important conversations that people are facing every single day of their lives and affecting people. I mean, they just declared a state of emergency in Los Angeles for people who are afraid to leave their homes because they're afraid of ICE. And so they're declaring a state of emergency to help those people who have not been able to work for months and months because they can't leave. So anyways, it's a very real state of affairs in the way the world is. And this work doesn't go away, right? To your point of it being unpopular, it shouldn't be that it depends on the political climate, whether this work is acceptable or not acceptable. And it is about humanity and it is about uplifting all people and recognizing everybody as equal humans. So,
yeah, absolutely. And I think fear is always part of this work. It's always scary and nerve-wracking to be the unpopular voice in the room. And what I've learned, particularly from my days in community organizing, is that when there's more of us, it's less scary. And when we cultivate a culture within our organizations, within the community and the friendship bonds that we build, that I got your back. You know, this is not just about me or about the work that I do. When I speak up, I want to feel that my community, whether it's in marketing or beyond, has my back. And then I need to challenge myself to do that for other people too. So to me, the kind of individualism that is so ingrained in corporate spaces is precisely what is preventing us from developing these relationship of solidarity when we don't have to be as afraid when we know that there's somebody standing next to us who will back us up, who will defend us, who will give us our next contract when the previous one, for one reason or another, ran out. You know, so community and that solidarity seems ever so important in this moment. My point is that fear is something that I have personally wrestled. I mean, ever since I was a teenager in Eastern Europe, because it's never
Yeah.
pleasant to be the unpopular voice in the room. And so, in some ways, I think part of the work is to develop that relationship with fear and almost befriend it, and to understand that when I'm afraid is actually when I'm speaking truth to power and when I need to say what needs to be said. A lot of times I feel like, I have presence on LinkedIn, I speak up quite a bit, and people on mentorship calls or other what kinds of connections ask me, well, how do you speak so much? How are you not afraid? I'm afraid all the time. And there have been times when, I have said something publicly that I know would cost me my job, and ultimately it did. And so,
Yeah.
the way that we befriend fear and almost see it as a moral compass for things that
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
need to do. Obviously, we can't do it all the time, and not all of us could do it at all times and in all contexts. But yeah, I think there's something there about being able to treat it as a almost like a productive force when it comes to our own conscience and principle.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're in like-minded company and we've got your back. And
Right? Yeah.
I believe the rest of the missed opportunities for good community of guests would as well. So
Love to,
you're in a good space
You
here.
took
yeah,
the
we're
words out of my
connect
mouth.
with
Yes.
more
Yes.
people who
That is
are listening to this. So always, yeah, we're here
Yeah.
to meet people who really resonate and fight the good fight together, so to say.
Yes, absolutely.
well, speaking of fighting the good fight, what would your ideal project or collaboration be?
Ooh. Oh, I think my ideal collaboration would really focus on bringing cultural intelligence to the forefront. And that means creating new knowledge and new data and new research that hasn't been done before. To me, it's so important for the agencies and specifically research companies that are part of the industry to use the resources to create new knowledge about what we can do better. Primarily because a lot of the criticism that impact marketing and inclusive marketing faces is that it doesn't work. And I think it does. And many
Yeah.
more
It's just more
many
expensive.
more people need the tools to know how to do it beyond just thinking about representation, and casting, which,
Yeah.
is such a low bar. So
Yeah.
I love what certain agencies and brands are doing. I know we're going to talk about one of the campaigns later on in this conversation, are doing in partnering with universities, in partnering with nonprofit
Yeah.
organizations, in partnering with
Yeah.
think tanks to create campaigns that are both obviously contributing and driving brand marketing, but also creating something new and different that can create new ways of thinking, new ways of looking at problems, or even highlighting problems that are understudied, unrepresented, and so on. And so I think the ideal work that is close to my heart is bridging the theory and the practice, the research and action, and asking how can we close this academic practitioner gap between
Yep.
what we know and what we do. Because if we don't
Yeah.
know, we don't know how to do. So that is something that I would love to do one day.
I love that.
Yes, may it be so. And that you get paid very well to do it.
Yes, most importantly.
Yes.
Yes, so that you can continue to do the good work and fight the good fight. What is a piece of advice you would give someone who might be listening to this and maybe hasn't read your book yet or hasn't dove into this space quite yet, but is interested in this idea of conscious marketing and understanding culture in this way and kind of incorporating this into the work? What's a piece of advice or where would you tell them to start, in addition to obviously picking up and reading your book so they can get the full spectrum?
I am passionate about advocating for the importance and relevance of critical thinking in the work that we do. And critical thinking
Mhm.
is
Yeah.
just a fancy word for asking why. Why is this
Hmm.
way? Why do I think that? Who taught me that? Why do I believe it? Is this the right way to approach this? Just the art of asking questions. The book does give readers tools and frameworks to think about these things in a more structured way.
Yeah.
But beyond the book or any lecture or any workshop or master class, to me, it really goes down to cultivating a culture or a relationship of curiosity and questioning within
Mhm.
our own self, questioning our
Yep.
beliefs, learning to be comfortable with being challenged and challenging ourselves, but also building a culture of questioning in our workplace, making it not scary or fearful for people to say, I don't agree with this, I disagree, or I'm not quite sure about this. And
Yeah.
then also being able to
Yeah.
say that to ourselves. And I do try to practice that in my own life, beyond any kind of work that I do. And it really goes down to seeing a social media video of somebody talking about a topic that I might feel strongly about and noticing that, yeah, I don't agree with that, right? And noticing that desire to pull away and to dismiss and learning how to stay
Mm.
there and how to say,
Mm.
okay, actually, I'm going to sit with the discomfort. I might strongly disagree with them. I might think their argument is not even strong enough, but how do I linger in that moment and not disconnect and hear another
Yeah.
perspective. So to me, that's the essence of critical consciousness that I talk about in the book and
Yeah.
how it can be applied to marketing. Ask why and also ask
Yeah.
what's missing here. What am I not covering? What we might be missing? What's being overlooked or
Yeah.
sidelined or underrepresented?
Yeah. I love that.
Amazing. Well, before we jump into the campaign that you've brought us, which we are very excited about, let's quickly review our criteria, not just for you, Anastasia, but also for our listeners. So, the first thing we always look at is alignment,
Next is partnerships,
call to action and transparency,
engagement.
and lastly, optimization and amplification.
So, with that, if you can please tell us about the campaign that you brought today, that you are seeing that is doing it well or not, and give us a quick summary of the creative for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. And then obviously we'll link to it in the show notes as well. And then we'll get into diving more deep on the criteria and analyzing it.
Yeah, the campaign that I brought that I think is worth celebrating and looking into is an ongoing partnership that was launched a couple of years ago, but it is Advil's Believe My Pain campaign. And it was launched in partnership with Morehouse School of Medicine, as well as a nonprofit organization called Black Health. And the campaign focused on addressing pain inequities within the Black communities in the United States. And what that means is that the pain really took seriously the topic of bias in how providers within medical institutions and practices treat the experiences of pain among Black patients. And so that has to do with a long history of the way that racial stereotypes have shaped how we think about Black people's experiences, stereotypes of Black people having thicker skin, quote unquote, which was a thing that was taught, in medical schools
Right.
to this
Well,
would become medical professionals. And so there were multiple aspects to this campaign, and I'll just touch on a couple of them. It used storytelling to highlight personal experiences. So Advil, in partnership with
Mm.
VML, and I believe my friends Walt Gear's team was behind this campaign. They created very compelling video storytelling from people who actually experience pain. But they didn't stop at that, and just raising awareness. They actually partnered with the Morehouse School of Medicine, where they're actually piloting a new course material for existing medical students who are going into the field, that is, not only raising awareness, but actually educating and creating new materials for essentially combating the pervasiveness of this bias. So doing continuing medical education. And I believe they also have a bunch of investments, financial investments that are committing to this particular work over the period of time. I think it was, multiple years.
Yeah. We were so excited
It's
to
so
see this
good.
come through. And it's so refreshing to see when a company has actually done the work and done the real research. To your point, having those partnerships with academic institutions, with nonprofits, it has all of that.
Yeah.
Right. And then to then output my love language resources and actually provide not just a campaign and show that, oh, we can tell these stories, but to actually have a full website full of resources to be building out programs that they can teach, and the impact that that can have depending on how widespread they're able to implement that across different medical schools, and having workshops and having, putting the money where their mouth is, having those grants is just so refreshing to see. And I just hope that this continues to be a project that they work on year over year, because it is so important. And I mean, we all know, right, that so much all medical research has been based off of white men. And so everyone else is at a disadvantage when you look at it compared to that, because we are not all the same in terms of how our pain is, how any of the processes. So it's very cool to see the Advil step into this space.
Yeah, and also in a way that's
and the work that they're doing.
relevant to, and aligned with their brand. I think that's such a point that I try to make continuously in my book and in my work. So much of impact work is dismissed because it feels misaligned, and like brands are just doing quote unquote charity work on some social issues to stay relevant. Well, it seems important to say, that's not particularly successful or great example of what it means to drive impact as a brand. But the fact that Advil is a product that relieves pain, and more than that, probably people who are not prescribed medication, prescription level painkillers that they need, they're likely turning to over the counter pain meds. So the alignment seems just so stellar here in the way that they're connecting the functional benefit of the product, the relieving the pain, with an ethical imperative to bring light to this, seems to be so just well done and thoughtful. And then also I wanted to mention the partnership aspect, because they did partner with a Morehouse School of Medicine, right, bringing in that medical expertise and making impact in healthcare education. Now they also have the Black Health Equity nonprofit, Black Health, as part of this partnership, which I think speaks to the desire to build community trust, right? And make sure it's not just kind of institutionalized within the medical sector, which can also come, with its own complexities and lack of trust around medical research that has exploited Black communities historically. So I thought that was so great. And then their talent for their forum that they hosted, which was part of storytelling series, but also a forum hosted by Elaine Welteroff, who's of course a former editor at Teen Vogue, and now is very much engaged in Black health through her focus on Black
birth fund.
Birth fund, Black maternal health. And so the forum that they created brought the leading experts in the field of Black health equity to also offer that expert perspective. So it's just a fantastic combination of community voices, personal stories, expert voices that represent these communities to actual investment and outputs that are going to hopefully change the way it is taught in the actual medical institutions.
Yeah, I saw Elaine speak at an event. She was a powerhouse. She's awesome. And the work that she's doing is very cool as well. But yeah, it hits on so many points. It's such a great example of how you can do this work well and still it benefits your business goals ultimately, right? It is truly just like wrapped up in a bow. And the fact that they've done there's follow through, there's a call to action, even,
it's not just checking boxes.
It's across the board.
Right. It's not just checking boxes. It's taking values and putting them into action and showing real commitment. Yeah. Like I said, no notes. I think this campaign was phenomenal. And I know it was from 2023, and it's incredible to see the longevity of the campaign. I am curious to see how they're keeping it going and how, are we going to see more ads from Advil around, are we going to see actual commercials that speak to this? I remember when it first came out, I definitely saw some of the Feel My Pain ads, but now where has it gone? And do we get that payoff of, these are the results of what has happened and how many people are reading the resources and actually enacting some of those best practices? How do we keep that goodness going? But this is phenomenal.
Yeah, that was the only question that I had. I guess that's the challenge, right? When you're doing meaningful work, and a lot of it happens, behind the scenes of teams that are working on this. How do we continue to raise awareness? And it's such a pertinent topic that won't be solved overnight. So I think it's also an example of the ways that a campaign can then have multiple iterations to follow that journey, to continue building on that. Right. And I only wish that more people knew about work like this as much as some of the other campaigns that are taking space in the headlines in the trade press for all sorts of reasons.
Totally.
Not the most cultural.
Yeah. It's so true. And it's interesting because sometimes companies feel like they don't want to have as much PR on something because they don't want it to seem performative. But at the same time, if nobody knows that you're doing the work, how are they supposed to know to go to find those resources? So in them having these partnerships and building these programs and workshops and courses, how many medical schools have they been able to distribute it to? How many hospital systems have they been able to work with to help implement this, or doctors' offices or networks of doctors, especially as we're watching our healthcare system falling apart in front of our eyes, and a lot of these populations can be the first to lose access to healthcare or the opportunities, and also more distrusting of the medical system. So how can this, there's so many iterations that could take place to continue to grow this. And you look at pharma sales in the way that, I'm sure that Advil isn't maybe pharma sales in the same way. So there's like representatives going around to doctors' offices talking about all these things. But is there something like that? Because doctors' offices do hand out samples of different types of medicines and things like that. Are there on the ground sales representatives that can also be spreading this message as they are delivering product to their doctors or their hospitals? How deep does the conversation go? Would be interesting to know, or even pharmacists being able to implement it universally. And back to the community organizing those grassroots efforts, like how do you disseminate?
Yeah.
And, there's so much opportunity, and I've only realized this recently because of what I do now. So my husband is a medical resident, and part of our work is that we are signed as talent through his social media. He is a Black doctor on social media, and that has been a new world that has opened up to me, how many of medical students, medical doctors, nurses are now part of the creator economy. So when we talk about kind of wanting to prevent seeing too performative, or the way that brands with these kind of initiatives, like if they're driving, large scale PR campaigns, it kind of can lose that community feel. I'm very excited about the way that kind of intersection between medical education and creator economy is creating these possibilities to engage actual Black medical professionals who have historically not been part of the media landscape. And my husband is a Black provider. So I see so many opportunities to leverage the kind of work that current professionals who are from and representing these communities are doing on social media. So I just hope to see this work live. I think that's the exciting part. There is definitely a trend with more medical providers using social media to reach not only their patients, but people in the medical profession who either look like them or share their commitments in improving the medical field.
Absolutely. And even being able to leverage on those creators to say, like, you might not have a provider who understands you and is a Black provider. And I know some of the resources on Advil's page too were about how to be able to advocate for yourself. So even having those medical providers be able
Mhm.
to speak to, maybe you're not able to come to me, but this is how you can advocate for yourself using this information with
Yeah.
whoever your provider may be, and very much might not understand you because they may not have had this education. So tapping into those creators in an authentic way would be invaluable to Advil, I would think. So yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Bring in new audience and new customers, and yeah, win across the board. Love it. Wow. Any other missed opportunities for good here? I think we've hit them all, but any others to add?
Nothing comes to mind. I guess as we're talking, I think there's just so much opportunities with creators. And I think the point about self
Yeah.
advocacy is something that I haven't really thought about before, but I think that's just so important in these initiatives to tackle things from institutional angle, but also individual angle. So your point is just making me think
Yes.
about kind of the different levels of impact, right? That we are not focusing just on institutional change, which takes a lot of time, as was previously mentioned, but like individual self empowerment, and it also takes my mind to thinking about how a lot of the challenges people have is because they start to internalize those kind of messages that the pain isn't real. So I love this believe my pain. There seems to be quite a bit creative potential to really drive that
Mm-hmm.
message across that not only teaches the providers but empowers ourselves, right? And that's actually relevant to so many people and not just those who are exposed to racial bias, but to women. You know, there's a whole conversation
Mm-hmm.
about,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, dare I say, barbaric practices like IUD insertion, where women,
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
you know, done that. Don't remind me, you know, the way that the pain just in general is treated. So as we're
Yep.
talking, I guess I'm seeing there is opportunities for a lot more people to relate that. And pain is just something so human, you know, that we can relate to. Like
Yeah.
I remember when I, for better or for worse, had my wisdom tooth removed in Eastern Europe. It was cheaper, but did not have adequate pain management. Like it made me empathize with people a whole
Oh,
lot more. And so I think now that we're
yeah.
talking the idea of pain, that is a
Yeah.
universal human truth, right? We know
Yeah.
what it's like to be in pain and
Totally.
see other people in pain. And so how can we think about the
And it
creative?
builds empathy.
I was about to say pain
Yeah.
as like as a driver of
Yes.
empathy and mutual
Yeah.
advocacy.
Yes.
So gosh, that just I think that's very exciting as like an insight of what
Yeah.
unite people.
Well, it is interesting, right? Because they could take that literal campaign, Believe My Pain, and they've focused specifically on one group thus far, but they could do a whole campaign with the same
Right.
tagline on women. They could do it on
Yep.
any group because again, most of this medical
Yep.
work has been based off of white men. And so there are many different groups that face that experience of people not believing their pain and doctor and over having to over explain and people not believing them. And we see in the maternal healthcare space, like we were speaking of, right? In women in general, there's so many different areas in which this shows up. And so they could take this one campaign so far further in directly with this group, or they could expand it to other groups. There's so many opportunities for it. And then also on the policy side, I think that's like the one space that at least currently doesn't look like they're doing anything in the policy space. But that's another area in which maybe they could touch on if they wanted to go that far as well to if there is something relevant in that space. I don't know if there's policy specifically that they could push forward that can make a difference for patients' lives and equity in the healthcare space. But just another idea there. But
Yeah.
anyhow.
And to both of your points, like if I can just put a bow
Yeah.
on this, we always look at Dove as one of the gold standards, right? Because of how that their core essence is real beauty, right? And that shows up in everything they do. What if Advil took a page out of Dove's book and did exactly what we're talking about? Took Believe My Pain and took it and ran. And I totally agree with you both. Yeah, exactly. This could be their real beauty because it has so many legs and it is such a human thing. So, yeah. Well done, friends. I think we nailed it. Call us, Advil. Let's get to work. Let's get Anastasia's husband.
The spokesperson.
Some more. Yeah, exactly. Official spokesperson.
I love it. Well,
yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Anastasia, for joining us today. Where can we send listeners and other folks to learn more about you and your work?
Yeah, I am on all socials at Anastasia K. Gabriel. So find me there. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, although I'm now moving a little bit into long form writing. So you can find me more so on Substack as well, anastasiakgabriel.substack.com. So yeah, as I think I mentioned earlier, really love doing these conversations and then hearing from folks. So my email, DMs, all of that is always open. So feel free to connect and reach out if something I've said resonated.
Amazing. And we will link to all of those in the show notes, and we'll link your Substack on our Substack. It'll be great.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for having me. This was a total pleasure. And I love whenever these things are pure joy and fun, which this certainly was.
Oh, thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us and for helping us shine a light and learn from those who are doing it well and reduce the missed opportunities for good.
We want to hear from you. Please let us know, what campaigns are you seeing that are doing it well? Who would you like to see us interview, and what campaign would you like us to audit?
Thank you to our listeners and to our Substack readers and to all of our supporters joining us on our mission to revolutionize the industry that we love.
Missed Opportunities for Good is a production of Aligned for Impact and Love of Good.